Hi, I'm Lieutenant Tom Luckman with the Bridgewater Fire Department, where I serve as the Training and Safety Officer. I'm here with Captain Craig Nedell, our Fire Prevention Officer, and today we're going to talk about sprinkler systems as it pertains to the fire service. So, Craig, what are we standing in front of here?
Right here is a training prop that was put together to help show everybody how a sprinkler system works, the different parts of it.
Do you mind running me through as if I'm a brand new guy, it's my first day on the job, what exactly am I looking at?
We'll just go over the parts of it first, and then we'll go back and kind of work our way through how to shut a system down and what each piece is for. So you've got your main control valve. This is considered an OS and Y valve. This will actually shut the system down completely. Then we come up, we have our check valve system into here. We have a couple gauges. We have a static and a residual pressure gauge. We have a drain valve off of this side of it. We have a flow switch that's built into it. We have an electric gong, and we have the standard water gong that's operated by water. And then on the back side, we have the test header port. On the front of it, on the front of every system, you should see the placard that gives you all the specifics of the system. It'll tell you how many heads, it'll tell you everything about the system that you should know, what kind of pressures you should be looking at, different stuff like that. If you do not see one of these, the system needs to be updated, and they need to have one of those for everyone.
Would you say it's common on these systems too that every valve is labeled in some way?
Yes, per code they're supposed to have a control valve label, they're supposed to have a drain label, they're supposed to put placards on them so you know what each piece is for, so you're not just shutting down the wrong valves.
Great. So I know in the fire academy we talked to the new recruits. I remember learning when I was a new recruit about an OS and Y valve. That stands for outside stem and yoke.
Yes.
And that means that I can actually see the threads sticking out.
So if you're at a glance, you can tell that that valve is open or closed. If you see the stem, it is open.
Okay.
If you do not see any stem, that means the valve is now closed and the system is shut down.
Okay, that makes sense. And this prop's pretty cool because we can actually flow water through it. So these gauges are actually giving us a real pressure right now. Okay.
Yep. The one thing we didn't mention on the back is some systems will have them, some won't. It's called a retard chamber. What that is for is to, if you have a system that's fed off a fluctuating water source, they'll put that chamber onto there, and that helps absorb the fluctuation in water pressure so you don't have false activations.
Okay. Now you mentioned these red boxes here, that these are a water flow indicator.
Yep, up top you have a flow indicator. So from here up is the system. You'll have a flow indicator in there. So as water's flowing through, it now activates this, which would activate the fire alarm. If you have an electric bell, it's fed off of the flow indicator, the flow valve, which will actuate that. If you have a water gong, once the water starts flowing through it, it'll actually flow through the back. There's a small hydraulically driven motor, which then activates the bell.
So a water gong is actually powered by water,
yes.
Hence the name.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And on the OS and Y valve, you have what's considered a tamper switch. The tamper switch, if you try to close that OS and Y valve at all, within a turn, that tamper valve, the tamper switch will activate the fire alarm, and it will show tamper. If you have multiple systems, you have multiple risers, you'll have multiple tamper switches on every valve. That way, if somebody tries to shut down just one section, it'll indicate that there's a tamper on that riser. Most of the time, your OS and Y valves, you'll see them chained.
Okay.
That way, they cannot close it without unlocking it, taking the chain off it. Then you can close it. If they need to service the system, if they have a leak or something, they need to shut it down. They need to notify the fire department. They're shutting it down. Take the chain off, and then you can close the valve. But the valve will only let it turn a time or two before the chain binds up.
So for routine maintenance, they're going to unlock that. But
Yes.
if we show up and we need to shut that down, we're just gonna bust through that padlock or cut the chain?
There should be a key in the Knox box.
Okay.
If we have the key, unlock it, take the chain off, and then we can shut the system down.
So why do we need to know if there's a tamper? Is that like for arson prevention? Like
Yes.
someone wants to light a building on fire, they're gonna shut the sprinkler off
Yep,
first?
or if somebody doesn't know what it is and they just, oh, we got a drip over here, they go and shut
Okay.
something down thinking they're shutting down the water to that. That's what the tamper switch is for. So now you know somebody has been in there and touched the system that shouldn't have been.
Okay, that makes sense. So I know out there we have wet systems, dry systems, deluge systems. We're looking at here, this is a cutout of a wet system.
Yes.
What else would be on here if it was a dry system?
So on a dry system, you can have a combination wet and dry.
Okay,
If it's a complete dry system, you'll have a pressure chamber that has air lines off it, and it has an air compressor that keeps the pressure to a certain in there, so it overcomes the water pressure coming in. Once a head opens, it allows that air to escape out of there, and it opens the valve and lets the water flow
Okay.
out.
so this gauge will read higher because that's the air pressure keeping that clapper
Yes.
valve shut. Okay,
Yes.
so if, I know we've gone on calls in the past and, the sprinkler tech will be like, I'm working on the jockey pump. Is he talking about the air compressor?
No, so if you have a system that has a fire pump,
Okay,
what the jockey pump is for, it's just a smaller pump to keep pressure to where it's supposed to be. If the jockey pump either quits working or can't overcome the pressure that it's supposed to, that's when the main fire pump will kick in.
Okay.
The jockey pump is just to keep the system at a particular pressure. It's not meant to enhance the flow of it or anything. So if you have a large warehouse that has a fire pump, it'll usually have a small jockey pump with it just to keep the pressure
Okay.
to where it wants.
That makes sense.
Once the system opens, the pressure's gonna, the pressure drop will activate the fire pump. That will kick in. Usually they're diesel fire pumps. It'll start up, and then that it will pump the system.
okay. So, Craig, when we show up to a call, say Central Station called the fire station and they said, go to 774 Plymouth Street for a water flow activation. Does that actually mean that there's water flowing in the system?
Not always.
Okay.
So the water flow could activate off a couple things. If you have a fluctuation in pressure and it activates the flow switch, it could be just enough that it creates that, and it will give you a water flow alarm. If you show up and you have an electric bell and it's ringing, that could be because it's fed off that flow switch.
Okay,
If you show up and you have the water gong sounding, you normally have a water flow. You'll also see a drain. It's usually lower on the building, right below it, that you'll see water coming out of. If
Okay.
you see water coming out of it, you have a flow of some kind.
and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a sprinkler head, right? A broken pipe could cause
Yes.
the same thing?
Yes.
All right, so if we show up and the water gong is going off, I'm on the ambulance, I go around to the Charlie side of the building, you'd consider that pertinent information to radio off to the
Yes,
officer, right?
absolutely.
Okay,
Because if you have a water gong, you have some type of flow. If you have an electric bell, you could have a flow, same
Or
thing.
it
You could
might
have a
have just
broken
been-
pipe, something, but it was enough that it activated this flow switch. And that, once this activates, it sends the signal to the fire alarm panel and to the electric bell.
okay,
So if you pull up to a building, that means you have water flow.
okay,
Because the water is now flowing through here, like I said, it's a hydraulically driven pump that spins, and that's what's the,
so the water that's
activates
flowing is going through a pipe into the water gong, and
Yes.
it's ringing that bell?
Yes.
And that's pretty distinct from just a regular fire alarm too? So we'll
Absolutely.
hear the strobes, or we'll see the strobes, we'll hear the alarm going off, and then if we hear that, that's a dead
Yep,
giveaway.
and
That
again.
you either have a sprinkler
you'll-
blown or...
Again, you'll see a drain where you'll see water actually coming out the
Okay.
drain.
All right, so we show up, we got water flowing, the companies have investigated, let's say it's a broken pipe, happens all the time in the spring, right? Wintertime, uninsulated attics, they'll freeze, they get a little break somewhere. We can't wedge that sprinkler head because it's not a sprinkler head. What do we do as the fire department to shut that system down? Is there anything we can do to help?
You can try to isolate with a zone valve.
Okay.
A lot of our apartment buildings and bigger buildings, we try to put zone valves in so you're not shutting down the entire building. So if you have one riser that goes up the stairwell of an apartment building, each floor will usually have a zone valve.
Okay.
So if you have a break on, say, the third floor of a 4-story, you can isolate that zone. Once you close the zone valve, then you can open the drain valve, and it will help drain the water out of the system to stop the leak until they can get a repair technician there.
Yeah, so if we don't open that drain and we just shut the OS&Y, we're relying on all that water to come out of the break.
Correct.
Or out of the head.
Yes.
And there could be potentially miles of pipe inside of some of these
Some
large
of the big
right?
warehouses, everything have a lot. So you open the drain, let it drain out. You still got protection. You know, if it's a multi-story building, you still have protection below it and above it, but you've isolated that one floor off. Some buildings will actually have multiple isolations because you could have multiple standpipes and they'll feed off of each standpipe. So if you zone out that one section, the floor could have protection still, but your one end of it, you're going to shut the sprinkler down on.
So that way we minimize what we're
Yes.
leaving without fire protection
Yes.
inside of the building. Okay. Do we ever turn the system back on?
No.
No, we're going to let the sprinkler company.
Yep. Sprinkler tech will have to come out. They'll find out what it is. If it's a broken pipe, they replace the pipe. Then they have to recharge the system, bring it back online, and make sure that everything is working properly.
All right, great. So if we had this going, I don't know, you want to set off the water gong again, and I'm going to try to shut down this OS&Y valve. So this is such a small system, that stopped that gong pretty quickly, but in actuality, it's going to take a minute for everything to drain out,
and then once you do that, you can open up the drain valve. You'll see your pressures have now dropped to 0 because you have no incoming, you have no pressure left in the system. Your test header should have 0.
Yep. All right. So at this point, we would just tell the building owner, get a hold of your sprinkler company, and you have no fire protection right now.
Correct. Your entire system is shut down. We weren't able to isolate any zones. Your complete system is shut down. You have to have it fixed before the building gets occupied again.
All right. All right, so thank you, Captain Nedell, for going over sprinkler systems with me. Is there any other closing thoughts you can have on this? Any sort of things that we need to look out for? Do you think we covered all of it?
I think you covered most of it. Like I said, the big thing is with the stem valves. You can tell whether it's open or closed at a glance. The only thing is if it's partially closed, it's hard to tell, but that could be given a restriction in your flow if you're not, if somebody closes it 3/4 of the way. But as long as you have the stem sticking out, you know it's open and you're getting some flow. Again, if they tried to close it at all, you should have the tamper switch has been activated, and it should show a tamper on the panel.
All right. That concludes our video on sprinkler systems.